You trusted what you could see. You trusted what you could touch. You trusted the weight of circumstances pressing against your chest and called it truth. And in that moment, quiet, unnoticed, you handed your power away. Not to the world, not to fate, not to some invisible force beyond your reach, but to an agreement you never consciously made. That reality, as it appears, is final. Listen closely. The world has never spoken to you directly. It has always whispered through your perception. Every failure that felt permanent, every rejection that felt personal, every delay that convinced you you were behind it all passed through the same narrow doorway before it reached your soul, your mind, and what entered you was never reality itself, but a translation, a meaning. Fear was never proof. Doubt was never evidence. The heaviness you carry was never confirmation that you are lacking or late or unchosen. These are not facts carved into the structure of existence. They are interpretations that learned how to sound authoritative because you heard them too often in silence. The mind repeats what it believes will keep you safe, even when that repetition becomes a cage. You were taught to bow to appearances, to look at what is happening and assume it explains who you are, to measure yourself against outcomes and call the measurement identity. But the world you see is not the world that is. It is the world filtered through expectation, memory, conditioning, and unfinished emotional business you never named. Reality does not dominate you by force. It rules you by consent. This is where the misunderstanding begins. When you hear the words, ignore reality, something in you resists. It sounds reckless, delusional, dangerous. But ignoring reality does not mean pretending the wall is not there while you walk into it. It means refusing to let the wall define what is possible for you. It means withdrawing belief from appearances that have outlived their authority. It means recognizing that what confronts you is not a verdict, but a signal one that only has meaning because you assign it meaning. Your unconscious already knows this, that part of you that reacts before thought, that tightens your chest before logic arrives, that feels defeated before evidence is weighed. It understands that the world you experience is shaped from the inside out. That is why two people can stand in the same storm and live in entirely different realities. One sees punishment, the other sees initiation. The rain does not change, the interpretation does. You have been living under the illusion of external control, believing that once circumstances shift, you will finally feel aligned. Once results appear, confidence will arrive. Once approval comes, permission will be granted. But this sequence has always been reversed. The inner state precedes the outer echo. What you call reality is often just a delayed reflection of beliefs you forgot you were holding. Notice how quickly the mind reaches for conclusions. A setback happens and it declares meaning before you ask a question. A comparison arises and it delivers a sentence before you offer a defense. This is how it is. This is how it will always be. These statements feel solid, but they are hallucinations stabilized by repetition. They survive not because they are true, but because they are familiar. You are not reacting to life. You are reacting to symbols, images, memories, emotional residues. The mind collapses the present into the past and calls it prediction, and then it warns you not to expand, but to contract, to stay small, to stay safe, to stay consistent with the story written when you were trying to survive, not trying to awaken. What if the voice you call realism is simply the echo of an outdated identity? What if the heaviness you interpret as intuition is unresolved fear wearing the mask of wisdom? The mind is skilled at disguising limitation as logic. It will tell you to wait when the real impulse is to step forward. It will tell you to be patient when the deeper truth is that you are avoiding responsibility for your own becoming. Reality does not resist you. It reflects you. And reflections change the moment the source changes. This is not poetry. This is psychological law. The inner posture you hold toward life shapes the angles through which experience meets you. When you believe you are behind, every delay confirms it. When you believe you are unworthy, every silence feels like rejection. The world is not cruel. It is precise. Ignoring reality, then, is an act of inner sovereignty. It is the refusal to let surface-level appearances dictate deep-level identity. It is choosing to stand inside yourself rather than outside, waiting for permission. It is recognizing that the meaning you assign to what happens determines the emotional gravity it carries. Without your belief, appearances are neutral. They gain weight only when you lean into them. Your unconscious listens constantly. Not to your words, but to your posture, to the assumptions you breathe without noticing, to the conclusions you accept before questioning. When you stop feeding it, the signal that the outer world is in charge, something begins to loosen, not dramatically, not loudly, but subtly, like tension releasing from a muscle you forgot was clenched. You do not need to fight reality. You do not need to escape it. You need to see through it. To recognize that what you have been calling how things are is often just how things have been interpreted from a limited vantage point. And vantage points can change instantly. The moment awareness returns to its rightful place, there is a deeper intelligence within you that has been watching quietly. It does not panic when circumstances shift. It does not rush to label experiences as good or bad. It observes, it integrates, it knows that the outer world rearranges itself naturally around a centered inner axis. When you begin to trust this intelligence, the grip of appearances weakens. The world will still speak. Challenges will still arise. Forms will still shift and dissolve. But something fundamental changes when you no longer mistake the message for the messenger. When you stop asking reality who you are and start deciding from within, a different conversation begins, one that does not end here, but continues unfolding the moment you stop mistaking the surface for the source. You keep telling yourself that if you push harder, if you grind longer, if you apply more force, reality will eventually surrender. But it never does. And the reason it never does is not because the world is stubborn, it's because the world is obedient to something you refuse to see. You're negotiating with the surface while the real decision was already made far beneath it. Life does not respond to effort alone. It responds to alignment, and alignment is not conscious. It is subterranean. You wake up every day believing you are in control because you can choose your actions. You choose to work, to try, to persist, to plan, but beneath those choices sits a deeper script, quietly deciding what those actions are allowed to produce. You can row as hard as you want, but if the current beneath you is moving in the opposite direction, exhaustion is the only guaranteed result. This is why some people try endlessly and remain stuck, while others appear to move effortlessly. It is not talent. It is not luck. It is not circumstance. It is congruence between the visible self and the invisible one. The world you experience is not shaped by what you want. It is shaped by what you expect. An expectation is not a thought. It is a settled conclusion, a silent assumption about what is possible for someone like you. You may say you want more, but if somewhere inside you have already decided that more is dangerous, undeserved, unrealistic, or temporary, reality will faithfully mirror that decision. Not to punish you, but to stay consistent with you. This is where effort collapses into frustration. You push, but something resists. You plan, but something delays. You visualize, but something sabotages. And you call it bad timing, bad luck, or a cruel world. But the resistance is not external. It is internal, hidden behind habits, reactions, and emotional reflexes you didn't consciously choose. The mind that speaks in words is not the mind that runs your life. The mind that runs your life speaks in patterns. Look closely and you'll see it. The same outcomes repeating in different forms, different faces, same dynamics, different opportunities, same endings. You call it coincidence, but it's coherence. A private logic you carry within, shaping what feels familiar, what feels safe, and what feels impossible. Reality does not argue with this logic. It obeys it. This is why facts don't change destiny. Two people can face the same facts and live in entirely different worlds. One sees a closed door and stops. The other sees the same door and looks for another entrance. The fact did not decide the outcome. The meaning did, and meaning is not in the world. It is assigned from within. What you call reality is not what is happening. It is what you believe is happening. You think you are reacting to life, but most of the time you are reacting to an interpretation you made so long ago you forgot you made it. A conclusion formed in silence, a belief shaped by repetition, a story that once protected you and now confines you. This is the quiet power of the subconscious. It does not shout commands. It whispers assumptions, and those assumptions become the lens through which everything passes. When you hear the phrase instant change, your mind rebels. You imagine miracles, shortcuts, fantasies, but the instant is not in the event. It is in the shift. The moment you stop believing an old interpretation, reality loses its grip on you. Not because the world changed, but because your relationship to it did. The same circumstance that once felt heavy suddenly feels neutral. The same obstacle that once felt final now feels negotiable. Nothing moved, yet everything changed. This is what it means to ignore reality, not to deny what is happening, but to refuse to let appearances dictate identity, to stop allowing the visible moment to define the invisible self. When you no longer treat circumstances as verdicts, they lose their authority. They become information instead of judgment, feedback instead of fate. Most people never experience this because they confuse awareness with effort. They try to force belief rather than observe resistance. They repeat affirmations while ignoring contradictions. They demand results while quietly doubting their right to have them. And the subconscious listens not to what you repeat, but to what you resolve. It watches what you tolerate. It records what you accept as normal. That is the data it uses to construct your experience. So when you feel stuck, it is not because you are trapped. It is because you are loyal to an old self-image, an outdated expectation, a familiar struggle. The prison is not made of walls. It is made of agreements you forgot you signed. And the key, the moment you see this, something subtle happens. You stop fighting the world and start listening to yourself. You notice the emotional reactions that arise before logic enters the room. You notice the quiet, "Of course this would happen to me," that slips in unnoticed. You notice the inner posture you take towards success, failure, visibility, power, and in that noticing, space appears. That space is where change begins. Not loud, not dramatic, just precise. A withdrawal of belief from an old story. A refusal to reinforce a pattern. A decision to remain present instead of reactive. And from that place, action changes quality. It is no longer desperate. It is deliberate, no longer compensating, no longer trying to prove something to the world. Reality responds immediately to this, not by rearranging itself overnight, but by loosening. Doors that felt sealed feel movable. Delays feel informative instead of insulting. You are no longer begging life to change. You are allowing it to reflect a different center. This is the illusion of external power dissolving. You realize the world was never the authority. It was the echo. And the moment the inner voice shifts, the echo cannot help but follow. You keep wondering why the moment you move toward what you want, something inside you tightens. Why opportunity appears, and suddenly your chest fills with unease. Why the very future you claim to desire feels heavy, threatening, almost hostile. It is not bad luck. It is not the world resisting you. It is the part of you that you buried long ago, watching from the dark, waiting to be acknowledged. There is a self you learned to hide in order to survive, a voice you silenced because it was inconvenient, an instinct you were told was dangerous, shameful, unacceptable. You pushed it down and called it growth. You denied it and called it maturity. But nothing you suppress ever disappears. It only waits. And while you are busy chasing light, it works quietly beneath the surface, pulling strings you don't even know exist. You think you fail because you are not ready. You think you hesitate because you lack confidence. But hesitation is not weakness. It is resistance. And resistance always comes from within. Every time you stand at the edge of change and feel an invisible hand pulling you back, that hand is yours. It belongs to the part of you that does not trust what you say you want, because it remembers the cost of wanting before. You desire success, yet you resist visibility. You desire love, yet you resist vulnerability. You desire power, yet you resist responsibility. And you call this contradiction confusion. But it is not confusion. It is conflict. A silent war between who you present to the world and who you refuse to face when you are alone. The mind is not a single voice, it is a chamber. And inside that chamber live identities formed in moments of pain, fear, rejection, and survival. These identities do not care about your goals. They care about safety. They care about not being exposed again. They care about keeping you within the boundaries that once kept you alive. So when you move towards something unfamiliar, something expansive, something that demands more of you, they rise up not to punish you, but to protect themselves. This is why effort alone never works. You can push harder, work longer, repeat affirmations until your voice goes hoarse and still feel blocked. Because the part of you that resists is not impressed by force. It is not persuaded by optimism. It does not respond to motivation. It responds only to truth. You resist what you want, because getting it would force you to become someone you have avoided being. It would demand that you step out of old identities built around struggle, invisibility, or victimhood. It would require you to let go of the story that explains your pain. And that story, as painful as it is, has become familiar. Familiarity feels safer than freedom. So you sabotage, not dramatically, quietly. You procrastinate at the exact moment momentum begins. You doubt yourself when clarity arrives. You find flaws in opportunities that once excited you. You call it intuition, but it is fear wearing a convincing mask. Fear that says, if you change, you will lose who you are. Fear that whispers, if you succeed, you will be seen. Fear that asks, if you get what you want, who will you blame when you are still not fulfilled? This is why so many people stand inches from transformation and turn back. Not because they cannot go forward, but because going forward would expose the parts of themselves they worked so hard to hide. The anger they never expressed, the ambition they were told was dangerous, the desire to be more which once cost them love or belonging. You cannot manifest while divided. You cannot move forward while part of you is pulling backward. The inner opposition must be faced, not defeated. Because the part of you that resists is not your enemy. It is a wounded guardian. It learned to say no when no one else protected you. It learned to close doors when openness meant pain. And now, it does not know that the danger has passed. This is where most people make the mistake. They try to replace darkness with light. They try to outgrow fear with positivity. They try to silence discomfort with distraction. But what is ignored does not weaken. It gains control. What is denied does not dissolve. It directs your life from the shadows. Confrontation is the only door. Not aggression, not judgment. Presence. The willingness to look at what you dislike about yourself without flinching. The courage to admit that part of you is afraid of winning, afraid of being powerful, afraid of being responsible for your own destiny. When you stop pretending this part does not exist, it loses its grip. When you stop fighting it, it stops fighting you. You are not blocked because you lack discipline. You are blocked because you have not listened. You have not sat with the discomfort long enough to hear what it is protecting. You have not asked why success feels threatening, why peace feels unfamiliar, why certainty feels dangerous. These answers are not intellectual. They are emotional. They live in the body, in the tightening of the chest, in the sudden fatigue, in the urge to distract yourself the moment things begin to align. This is the paradox no one tells you. The closer you get to what you want, the louder the resistance becomes. Not because it is wrong, but because it matters. The shadow only reacts when something meaningful is at stake. It does not interfere with small dreams. It intervenes when your life is about to change. So if you feel resistance, do not retreat. Do not label it failure. See it as a signal that you are standing at the edge of something real, something that demands integration instead of escape. Something that requires you to bring all of yourself forward, not just the parts that look good in the light. The moment you stop running from the inner conflict, it stops controlling you. The moment you turn toward it without judgment, it begins to soften. And in that softening, something shifts. Not outside, inside. The war quiets, the pull weakens, and the energy that was once spent on sabotage becomes available for movement. Nothing has changed yet in the world around you, and yet everything has changed in how you stand within it. You stop fighting yourself the moment you realize that the war was never outside. It was never life against you. It was you against the parts of yourself you were taught to hide, silence, and abandon. The moment you start trying to overpower reality, something unexpected happens. Reality loosens its grip, not because it changed, but because you did. Integration begins there, not as a concept, but as a quiet internal shift where resistance finally runs out of energy. Ignoring reality was never about closing your eyes. It was never about pretending circumstances don't exist. That is escapism, and escapism always comes back as fear. True ignorance of reality is far more radical. It is the refusal to grant appearances authority over your inner state. It is the decision to stop letting the outer world dictate who you are allowed to be inside. When you reclaim that authority, reality stops shouting and starts responding. The parts of you that once sabotaged your progress were never enemies. They were exiles. Traits you buried because they didn't fit the image you thought you had to maintain. Anger you labeled as weakness. Desire you called dangerous. Confidence you mistook for arrogance. Vulnerability you confused with fragility. These fragments didn't disappear when you rejected them. They went underground. And from there, they learned how to pull the strings quietly. Every time you tried to move forward and felt an invisible wall, it wasn't life stopping you. It was a part of you refusing to cooperate, not out of malice, but out of neglect. What you resist within does not dissolve. It waits. It waits for moments of stress, moments of ambition, moments where you dare to want more, and then it surfaces not to destroy you, but to be acknowledged. Integration is the act of listening without judgment, of allowing contradictions to exist without forcing resolution too soon. Strength does not come from cutting off weakness. It comes from understanding it. Confidence does not emerge from dominance. It emerges from coherence. When the inner fragments stop competing for control, something stabilizes. Your energy stops leaking. Your attention stops fracturing. You feel solid, not rigid, but grounded. This is where self-mastery begins, not as discipline imposed from above, but as harmony established from within. You no longer need to force motivation because resistance has softened. You no longer need constant reassurance because your center holds. The voice that once questioned every step grows quiet, not because it was silenced, but because it was finally heard. The world responds differently to someone who is internally aligned. Not magically, not theatrically, but unmistakably. People sense it before they understand it. Opportunities gravitate, not because you chased them harder, but because you stopped emitting contradiction. Your presence carries less urgency and more certainty, less need, more direction. Reality mirrors that shift faithfully because reality has always been a mirror. Identity changes here, not through reinvention, but through consolidation. You stop performing versions of yourself designed to survive approval. You stop reacting to every signal as if it were a verdict. Instead of fragmenting under pressure, you organize. Instead of collapsing into doubt, you return to center. The reactive self dissolves, not through suppression, but through irrelevance. It no longer serves a purpose. There is a calm that follows this shift, and it is not complacency, it is clarity. You see obstacles without dramatizing them. You acknowledge limitations without identifying with them. You act without needing guarantees. This is what it means to stand in inner authority. Not dominance over others, but sovereignty over your own perception. Wholeness does not mean perfection. It means nothing essential is left behind. Even fear has a place here, not as a commander, but as a signal. Even doubt becomes useful, not as a saboteur, but as a question. When all parts are allowed a seat at the table, none need to hijack the system. This is why resistance dissolves when acceptance arrives. The inner conflict that once demanded energy simply stops asking for it. And in that silence, desire becomes clean. No longer driven by compensation or escape, but by alignment. You want what fits you, not what proves you, and what fits you no longer feels distant. Ignoring reality in this sense is refusing to negotiate with distortion. It is choosing inner truth over external noise. It is recognizing that circumstances are temporary, but the relationship you have with yourself is constant. When that relationship stabilizes, everything else reorganizes around it. You move through life now with fewer internal debates. Decisions feel less dramatic. Effort feels more precise. You are no longer scattered across roles, masks, and reactions. You are present, and presence has weight. It bends situations not by force, but by consistency. This is not the end of struggle, but it is the end of fragmentation. Challenges still appear, but they meet a unified self instead of a divided one. And a unified self does not need to conquer reality. It simply meets it clear, intact, and unafraid to stand where it stands. From here, wanting no longer feels desperate. It feels natural. And reality, sensing no internal contradiction, begins to move in quieter, more cooperative ways. Not because you demanded it, but because there is nothing left inside you arguing against it. The moment inner conflict ends, reality loses its grip on you. Not because the world has changed, but because the tension that once distorted your perception has finally dissolved. You feel it before you can name it. A subtle click inside the psyche, like two gears finally locking into place after years of grinding against each other. This is the moment people mistake for luck. This is the moment others call coincidence. But it is neither. It is the moment resistance leaves the system. For most of your life, you believed desire was about wanting more control, more certainty, more proof. You thought the harder you pushed, the closer you would get. But the harder you pushed, the more reality pushed back. Because force does not create movement in the psyche. Tension does. And when tension disappears, movement becomes effortless. This is where the illusion breaks. You do not get what you want by convincing the world. You get what you want when the part of you that was arguing with yourself finally goes silent. When the inner courtroom shuts down, when the prosecution and the defense stop fighting over who you are allowed to be. In that silence, something reorganizes, not dramatically, not explosively, quietly, precisely, the way gravity works without announcing itself. Reality does not respond to need, it responds to coherence. When your inner world is fragmented, the outer world reflects fragmentation. When your inner world is aligned, the outer world reorganizes itself to match that alignment. Not because the universe is granting favors, but because perception shapes behavior, behavior shapes choices, and choices shape outcomes. The chain is invisible, but it is unbroken. This is why the change feels instant. Not because circumstances transform overnight, but because the weight you were carrying, the invisible friction, has been released. You move differently, you speak differently, you wait without desperation, you act without forcing. And the world, sensing no internal contradiction, no longer resists you. The mind stops negotiating with fear. The shadow no longer pulls you backward because it has been seen, acknowledged, integrated. What once sabotaged you now fuels you. The energy that was locked in avoidance becomes available for creation. You are no longer split between who you are and who you pretend to be. And in that wholeness, effort transforms into presence. This is the truth hidden beneath every promise of manifestation. Nothing is attracted. Nothing is summoned. Nothing is bent to your will. What happens instead is simpler and far more unsettling. Resistance collapses. When resistance collapses, the psyche stops sending mixed signals to reality. The static clears. The image sharpens. You are no longer trying to become something. You are allowing what was already forming to complete itself. And suddenly, things that felt impossibly distant move closer without strain. People respond without explanation. Opportunities appear without announcement. Decisions resolve themselves before anxiety can interfere. It feels like control, but it is not control. It is authority. Authority does not demand. It does not chase. It does not convince. Authority is recognized, not asserted. And when you reclaim it internally, reality mirrors that recognition externally. The world treats you the way your unconscious treats itself. This is why ignoring reality was never about denial. It was about refusing to grant appearances the final word. The moment you stop asking reality for permission to be whole, reality stops testing your resolve. The moment you stop reacting, it stops provoking. The moment you stop proving, it stops doubting you. You are no longer at war with what is. And because you are no longer fighting, movement becomes inevitable. What you want arrives not as a reward, but as a byproduct of inner order, like water finding the lowest point. Like a compass snapping back to true north, not dramatic, not mystical, precise. This is the calm certainty people misunderstand. It is not confidence built on outcomes. It is stillness built on self-recognition. You are no longer asking, will this work? Because the question itself has dissolved. There is nothing to prove to the world when the self is no longer divided. You stop measuring time by urgency. You stop measuring worth by validation. You stop scanning the horizon for signs. And in that absence of grasping, reality reorganizes itself around you. Because reality does not resist clarity. It only resists contradiction. This is the quiet secret behind every transformation that lasts. The reason some people seem to step into their lives effortlessly while others struggle endlessly with the same tools, the same knowledge, the same effort. One is aligned. The other is still negotiating with themselves. The instant change was never outside. It was the end of inner argument. And now there is nothing left to force, nothing left to chase, nothing left to convince, only movement natural, unstrained, inevitable. You stand in the center of your own perception, no longer pulled outward by fear or inward by doubt. Reality no longer feels like an obstacle because it is no longer an authority. It is a response. And in that realization, something settles permanently. Not excitement, not urgency, but a deep, immovable stillness. The kind that does not need reassurance. The kind that does not announce itself. The kind that knows without effort, without tension, without noise, that once the inner world is whole, the outer world has no choice but to follow.